Winchester's hammer clicked back, the sound cutting through the cabin's heavy silence like a knife.
Show my scars?
Gabriel Hayes stood with feet planted firm on weathered floorboards, his breathing measured despite the tremor in his hands. Before him, a man with blood seeping through his shirt pleaded with wild eyes. Please, she's not what you think. Outside, the river roared its ancient song, swollen with snowmelt and fury. On the bed lay an Apache woman, still as death save for the shallow rise and fall of her chest. The firelight caught the gleam of gold spilled from a small leather pouch near her limp hand. Gabriel's finger tensed on the trigger as thunder cracked overhead, rattling the cabin windows in their frames. She's not what you think. The world narrowed to the space between heartbeats. 3 days earlier, the river had been rising for days. Gabriel watched it from the rise where his cabin perched, a respectful distance from the water's hungry reach. This spring thaw had come early and angry, tearing at the banks with unusual violence. The old-timers in Dry Creek called it a 100-year flood, though Gabriel had no intention of riding into town to hear their predictions. He tightened the last knot on his makeshift levee, logs and stones that might spare his garden when the waters crested. His horse, Storm, nickered nervously from the corral, sensing the storm brewing in the heavy air.
If I show my
Gabriel
scars?
straightened, stretching the knots from his back, when something caught his ear beneath the river's constant growl. A cry, human and desperate. He scanned the churning water, squinting against the pale morning light. There, a dark shape thrashing amid debris where the river bent sharply around a stand of cottonwoods. Without thought, Gabriel was moving, boots pounding the muddy slope toward the water's edge. The shock of cold hit him like a blow when he waded in, the current immediately tugging at his legs with greedy hands. 20 feet out, he could see clearly now, a woman trapped among fallen branches, the river trying to claim her with each surge, her black hair plastered against bronze skin, her doe-skin dress heavy with water. An Apache woman. "Hold on!" Gabriel shouted above the roar. He fought the current, inch by agonizing inch, until his fingers found purchase on the slick branch where she clung. Her eyes fluttered open, wild, dark, and filled with a terror that transcended language. "I've got you," he said, though he wasn't certain she understood. When the branch snapped free, he lunged, catching her arm before the river could steal her away. Together, they battled to shore, half swimming, half crawling up the muddy bank until they collapsed on solid ground, chests heaving. Gabriel rolled her onto her side, pressing fingers to her neck. The pulse was there, faint but steady. She coughed suddenly, a harsh scraping sound as river water spilled from her lungs. Her eyes opened, gray-green and startlingly clear against her copper skin. "Easy," he murmured. "You're safe now." The woman flinched at his voice, trying to push herself back, but her arms trembled beneath her weight. "Where?" she croaked, her voice raw. "Near Dry Creek, my ranch." Fear flickered across her face as her gaze darted around. "No town. Please, no town." Gabriel frowned. "I'm not taking you there." "You freeze out here," she managed in halting English. He studied her face, the way she measured him with her eyes, weighing his words against some invisible scale of experience. "Let me help you to my cabin," he said finally. "Storm out." When he lifted her, she went rigid in his arms, lighter than he expected but tense as drawn wire. The trail back was treacherous, slick with mud. The sky had darkened to iron, promising the storm would break before nightfall. His cabin appeared as they crested the rise, a modest structure of weathered logs that had been his world for 3 years now. Smoke curled from the chimney where he'd banked the morning fire. He kicked the door open and carried her inside, setting her gently on the chair nearest the hearth. "Get those wet things off," he said, turning away to build up the fire. "There's privacy enough if I don't look." He heard the rustle of fabric behind him, the soft sound of cloth being wrung out. When he turned back, she'd wrapped herself in the blanket he'd left draped over the chair, her wet dress spread before the fire to dry. Her eyes watched him warily over the rim of the coffee cup he'd poured here. "My name, Nahimana," she offered quietly after a long silence. "People call me Naya." "Gabriel Hayes," he replied, keeping his distance. "You're safe here, Naya." She didn't seem convinced. Her eyes flicked to the door, then back to him, assessing escape routes even as she shivered beneath the blanket. "Safe not last long for my people," she added, her broken English carrying the weight of bitter experience. When lightning flashed outside, she flinched, her knuckles whitening around the tin cup. "Storm comes," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Gabriel nodded, moving to secure the shutters as the first heavy drop struck the roof. "It'll pass by morning." He paused at the window, noticing for the first time a dark stain on the blanket where it pressed against her shoulder. Not river water. Blood. "You're hurt." Naya's expression hardened. "It nothing." "Let me see." She hesitated, clutching the blanket tighter. "I was a scout in the war," Gabriel said quietly. "I've seen wounds before." Reluctantly, she lowered the blanket just enough to reveal her shoulder. The wound was clean, a bullet graze recent enough that it hadn't fully scabbed. Gabriel fetched his medical supplies without comment, aware of how her eyes tracked his every movement. As he cleaned and dressed the wound, he noticed a small leather pouch tied at her waist. Her hand kept returning to it, fingers checking its presence with the unconscious habit of someone guarding a treasure. "You good at this," she said, watching him wrap a clean bandage around her shoulder. "Had practice," Gabriel replied, his thoughts flickering to battlefield tents and the cries of dying men. To Thomas, his brother, and the letter that had come 6 months after Appomattox. "We regret to inform you." Outside, the storm announced itself properly with a crack of thunder that shook the cabin walls. Rain lashed at the windows, and the wind howled through the pines like a wounded beast. The world beyond the cabin disappeared behind a curtain of water. "You rest," Gabriel said, nodding toward the cot in the corner. "I'll take the floor." "I cannot pay," she whispered, a particular kind of wariness entering her voice. "Didn't ask for payment." Something flickered in her eyes, disbelief perhaps. Men always want something. Gabriel didn't answer. He simply added another log to the fire and spread his bedroll on the floor with his back to her. The floorboards were hard beneath his blanket, but he'd slept on worse. For a long while, the only sounds were rain hammering on the roof and her shallow breathing. Then she spoke again, barely above a whisper. "If I stay, will you not ask why?" "Not tonight," Gabriel said. "You're too tired to tell, and I'm too tired to listen." The silence after that was different, less tense, though far from comfortable. Gabriel listened as her breathing slowed, then the small creak of the cot as she shifted. Sleep didn't come easy for him. The image of her face, the fear, the defiance, the cold river light in her eyes stayed sharp behind his closed lids. In the gray hours before dawn, Naya's voice broke the cabin's silence, murmuring words in Apache that sounded like prayers or perhaps warnings. Gabriel lay still, listening to the cadence of a language he didn't understand but recognized from his scouting days. When he shifted to look at her, he found her sitting upright, eyes open but unseeing, lost in some dream or memory. As he moved toward her, she startled awake, a small knife appearing in her hand from beneath the blanket. Her eyes focused on him, wild for a moment before recognition dawned. "Bad dreams," Gabriel said, raising his palm slowly. Naya lowered the knife, her breathing ragged. "The river, always pulling me under." "You're safe now. The river can't reach you here." She looked at him strangely. "River reaches everywhere. My grandmother say, river remembers everything, every word, every sin. When floods come, it brings past back to your door." The words sent an unexpected chill down Gabriel's spine, reminding him of things he'd rather forget. Blood in creek water, the silent accusation in Thomas's last letter. "Your grandmother sounds wise," he said finally. "She was medicine woman. Teach me plants, healing." A shadow crossed Naya's face. "Soldiers kill her, say she witch." The confession hung in the air between them. The first piece of her story offered freely. Gabriel didn't press for more, recognizing the fragile trust being extended. "Try to sleep," he said quietly. "I'll keep watch." By morning, the storm had receded to a steady drizzle. Gabriel rose early, stoked the fire, and prepared coffee strong enough to wake the dead. He stepped outside to check on Storm, finding the horse agitated, favoring his front leg. "Easy, boy," Gabriel murmured, running his hands down the leg to find swelling at the fetlock. Must have slipped in the mud. When he returned to the cabin, Naya was up, wrapped in his blanket, watching the door as if counting the seconds he'd been gone. "You left," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Just checking on Storm. He's hurt his leg." She moved to the window, looking toward the corral. "I help," No herbs for swelling. Gabriel raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. They ate a simple breakfast of jerky and cornbread in silence. Afterward, Naya dressed in her still damp clothes and followed Gabriel to the corral. Despite her injury, she moved with purpose, examining Storm's leg with gentle hands that the horse accepted without protest. Need yarrow, willow bark, she said, glancing around the property. Have these? Gabriel shook his head. Not dried. Show me land, I find. They walked the perimeter of his property, Naya stopping occasionally to gather plants from beneath the shelter of trees or overhangs. Her knowledge was evident in the certainty of her movements, the way she tested leaves between her fingers and inhaled their scent. Back at the cabin, she crushed the herbs with a stone, mixing them with lard from the tin by the stove. The scent of crushed sage and yarrow filled the small room as she worked, her hands moving with the practiced rhythm of someone who had done this countless times. Your horse good spirit, she said as she applied the poultice to Storm's leg and wrapped it with a strip of clean cloth. Strong heart. He's been with me since the war, Gabriel replied. Naya nodded, her eyes on the horse. Animals know truth about people, better than people know. The simple wisdom in her words struck Gabriel unexpectedly. He watched as she stroked Storm's neck, murmuring something in Apache that made the horse's ears flick forward attentively. In my language, we call horse sweet, brother, she explained. When man forgets he kin to what carries him, he loses spirit. Guess there's a lot of lost spirits around here, Gabriel muttered. She looked at him then, her eyes bright with something fierce and knowing. Then find yours before it dies. The words hit deeper than he cared to admit. That evening, with the rain finally stopped and the cabin warmed by the hearth fire, Gabriel took out his harmonica, the one thing he'd kept from his army days besides bitter memories. He played a slow tune, something half remembered from a Tennessee night long ago. When he finished, Naya said softly, "That song, it sounds like home." "Where's that?" Gabriel asked. She smiled, small and sad. "Wherever wind doesn't hurt." Before Gabriel could respond, Storm's warning whinny cut through the quiet evening air. Gabriel was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, as he moved to the window. A rider approached along the muddy trail, his horse picking its way carefully through the puddles and debris left by the storm. The man rode like someone with questions that wouldn't wait, his long duster flapping around the legs of a big roan horse. "Inside," Gabriel told Naya, his voice low. "Stay there until I call." She slipped into the cabin without argument, closing the door just enough to leave a crack. Gabriel checked his rifle, then walked out to meet the rider, stopping at the edge of the porch. The man reined in his horse, revealing a weather-beaten face beneath a wide-brimmed hat. A deputy's badge glinted on his vest. "Wallace Reed," the rider introduced himself, "riding for Sheriff Ellis out of Dry Creek." Gabriel nodded once. "Gabriel Hayes, what brings you out this way after a storm, deputy?" Reed spat to one side, his eyes scanning the property. "Got a notice from the territorial marshal. Apache woman is wanted for theft and murder down Tucson Way. Trader in town swears he saw someone matching her description heading north before the flood." Gabriel kept his expression neutral. "Lot of debris coming down river these past days. Haven't seen any people." Reed studied him, eyes narrowing slightly. "Mind if I look around?" "I do, actually." Gabriel didn't move from his position on the porch steps. "Been tending a sick horse since dawn, not in a mood for company." A tense silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant rumble of the river and the nervous shuffle of Reed's horse. "You live alone out here, Hayes?" "That's right." Reed nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on the cabin door. "Well, if you see anything unusual, town's expecting you to report it. This Apache, she's dangerous. Killed a miner, stole gold dust worth more than this whole spread." "I'll keep that in mind." Reed turned his horse, but his parting words carried a veiled threat. "River's washing up all kinds of things lately. Secrets, lies, bodies." Gabriel watched until the deputy disappeared around the bend, then exhaled slowly. Inside, Naya stood by the hearth, her face tight with fear. "He knows," she whispered. "He suspects," Gabriel corrected. "There's a difference." She paced the small room, agitation in every line of her body. "I can't stay. You get trouble." "You planning to swim that river again?" Her chin lifted. "Better to drown than burn." Who said anything about burning? Men who want me alive, she said bitterly. They bring fire if they have to. Gabriel studied her, noting how her fear wasn't the panicked kind, but something deeper, born of experience. Whatever she'd run from, she'd already lived through worse. Tell me the truth, Naya, he said. What's chasing you? For a long moment, the only sounds were the river outside and the tick of cooling wood in the stove. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but steady. Man named Boone. Works with prospector. Marcus Thorne. They find small vein of gold in hills. She paused, her hand unconsciously touching the pouch at her waist. When Marcus die, Boone say I take what his. But no gold, only few coins I earn cleaning camp. Her voice faltered. Boone say he collect payment in flesh if I not give dust. The words hung ugly and raw in the air between them. I ran. River try stop me. You pull me out. Gabriel rubbed a hand over his jaw, feeling the weight of her confession settle like lead in his stomach. You believe me? She asked, watching his face. Don't see a reason not to. Her brow furrowed. Most men would. I'm not most men. That made her smile. Barely, but it was there. No, she said softly. You not. As night deepened, the cabin grew quiet. Gabriel cleaned his rifle while Naya mended a tear in her dress. The silence between them no longer strained, but thoughtful. Outside, the river continued its relentless song, a reminder of dangers past and those still waiting. That night, Gabriel dreamed of Thomas, not as he'd been in that final letter, bitter and disillusioned, but as the boy who'd followed Gabriel everywhere, who'd believed his big brother could fix anything broken. In the dream, Thomas stood by a river, trying to tell Gabriel something important, but his words were drowned by the roaring water. Gabriel woke before dawn, unsettled. He found Naya already up, standing by the window watching the eastern sky lighten. She turned when he stirred, her expression grave. Storm coming, she said. Not rain, men. Gabriel joined her at the window, following her gaze to the horizon. Nothing visible yet, but he'd learned long ago to trust the instincts of those who lived close to the land. How many? 3, maybe 4. Reed and others. She looked at him. Why you help me? I bring trouble to your door. Gabriel considered her question. By all rights, he should have handed her over to Reed, a wanted criminal by the law's reckoning. Yet something in him rebelled against the thought. Maybe I'm tired of doing nothing right in a world that keeps proving me wrong, he said finally. They packed quickly, dried meat, water, ammunition. Naya took only her small pouch and a knife Gabriel gave her. By the time the sun crested the hills, they were mounted on Storm, heading north toward a canyon Gabriel knew well from hunting trips. As they rode, Gabriel couldn't shake the feeling that he was crossing a line he couldn't return from. Not just harboring a fugitive, but choosing a side in a conflict he barely understood. Yet watching Naya straight back as she rode before him, he knew it was a choice he'd make again. The river had changed its course slightly after the flood, cutting new paths through the land. Like the water, Gabriel thought, some decisions carved new channels that altered everything downstream. There was no going back, only forward into whatever waters awaited. The canyon opened before them like a wound in the earth, its walls rising steep and striated with the memory of ancient waters. Storm picked his way carefully along the narrow trail, his injured leg much improved thanks to Naya's poultice. Gabriel kept his rifle across his lap, eyes scanning the ridgeline above them. By midday, they'd reached a natural alcove halfway up the eastern wall, a shallow cave protected from view by an outcropping of rock and a stand of juniper. From this vantage, they could see both the canyon floor and the approach trail without being easily spotted. We'll rest here, Gabriel said, dismounting. Keep watch for Reed and his men. Naya slid from the horse, her movements fluid despite her injured shoulder. She immediately set about gathering small, dry branches for a fire, working with the efficiency of someone accustomed to survival in harsh conditions. Gabriel tethered Storm where he could graze on the sparse grasses clinging to the rocky soil. The horse's ears flicked nervously, picking up sounds beyond human range. Someone coming, Naya whispered, freezing in place. Gabriel drew his rifle and crept to the edge of their shelter. Through his field glass, he spotted them, 3 riders moving slowly along the canyon floor. Reed led the way, flanked by two rough-looking men whose duster coats did little to hide the weapons they carried. Reed's brought company, Gabriel murmured. Miners by the look of them. Boone? Naya asked, her voice tight. Gabriel adjusted the glass. Can't tell from here. Stay low. They watched as the riders paused at a fork in the canyon, conferring briefly before splitting up. Reed took the northern branch while the other two continued along the main passage, directly toward their position. They're searching the whole canyon, Gabriel said. We need to move higher. Leaving their small camp in place as a decoy, they climbed further up the canyon wall, finding cover among a cluster of boulders that had tumbled down ages ago. The climb was treacherous, loose shale threatening to give way beneath their boots, but they reached the new position just as the two riders approached their abandoned camp. Through the field glass, Gabriel watched as one of the men dismounted to examine the still warm embers of their fire. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a patchy beard and a scar that pulled one eye into a permanent squint. The second man remained mounted, a shotgun balanced across his saddle. That Boone? Gabriel asked, passing the glass to Naya. She looked, then nodded once, her face hardening. Yes, other one is Pike. Works for anyone who pay. The men below were now methodically searching the area, their voices carrying in fragments up the canyon wall. Tracks lead up. Woman's worth more alive. Gold's the real prize. Gabriel calculated their options. The men below were between them and Storm. The path ahead led deeper into the canyon complex, but on foot and with Naya's injury, they wouldn't move fast enough to outrun mounted pursuers. I'll create a diversion, he decided. Get you to higher ground where they can't follow on horseback. Naya gripped his arm. No, they kill you. Not if I kill them first. The cold certainty in his voice surprised even him. Before she could protest further, a shout from below indicated the men had found their trail. Gabriel positioned himself behind an outcropping. Rifle ready. Stay hidden, he told Naya. No matter what happens. The first shot was a warning, aimed at the ground near Boone's feet as he started to climb. The man dove for cover, cursing loudly. That's far enough, Gabriel called down. Turn back now. We just want the Apache squaw, Boone shouted back. Hand her over, and we'll leave you be. Gabriel's answer was another shot, this one splintering rock inches from Pike's head. The man yelped and scrambled backward. What followed was a tense exchange of gunfire. Gabriel was careful with his shots, making each one count, keeping the men pinned down without actually hitting them. He had no desire to kill, not yet, but he needed to buy time for Cowboy to retreat further up the canyon. A bullet whined past his ear, too close for comfort. Gabriel ducked, then shifted position, working his way along the ridge to draw fire away from where Naya had hidden. The tactic worked. Both men focused their attention on him, allowing her to slip away unseen. Gabriel had just reloaded when he felt a presence beside him. Naya had circled back, now crouching at his side with a determined expression. I told you to run, he hissed. I not leave you, she replied simply, then pointed to a narrow crevice in the rock face. There, path leads to cave. They not find. A bullet struck the rock above them, showering them with stone fragments. Gabriel made a split-second decision, grabbing Naya's hand as they dashed toward the crevice she'd indicated. Shots followed them, but the angle was poor, and they reached the shelter of the narrow passage unharmed. The crevice widened into a natural chimney that led upward, eventually opening onto a hidden shelf high on the canyon wall. From there, a barely visible path snaked along the cliff face to a cave entrance, almost entirely concealed by scrub brush. Inside, the cave extended deeper than Gabriel had expected, its walls marked with ancient pictographs, handprints, spirals, and animal figures painted in red and white ochre. A small spring trickled from a crack in the rear wall, collecting in a natural basin before disappearing into the stone floor. Old people place, Naya explained, her voice hushed with respect. Spirit cave. Safe. Gabriel peered cautiously out the entrance. Far below, Boone and Pike had remounted their horses and were conferring with Reed, who had returned upon hearing the gunfire. After a heated discussion, all three rode back the way they had come, though Gabriel had no illusions they were giving up the chase. They're regrouping, he said, turning back to Naya. We bought some time, but they'll be back with more men. She nodded, sitting cross-legged near the spring. The chase had reopened her shoulder wound, a fresh stain darkening her dress. Without comment, Gabriel knelt beside her to check the injury. As he worked, Naya studied his face. "You good man, Gabriel Hayes. Why you live alone by river?" The question was simple but cut straight to the heart of things. Gabriel focused on rewrapping her shoulder, buying time to decide how much to share. "War changes a man," he finally said. "Some things you see can't unsee. Some things you do can't undo." "You lose someone," she said. Not a question. Gabriel nodded once. "My brother Thomas. He was a scout, like me, worked with Apache scouts tracking hostile styles." He paused, the familiar pain rising in his throat. His unit was ambushed. No survivors. Naya was silent for a long moment. Then, "You blame my people." "No." Gabriel's answer came quickly, surprising himself with its certainty. "Army reports said hostile Apache, but Thomas's letters told a different story. He wrote about respect for the scouts he worked with, said they were the finest trackers and most honorable men he'd known." He reached into his shirt, pulling out a small tin. Inside were 2 bullets in an old photograph. 2 young men in Union blue, standing shoulder to shoulder, their resemblance unmistakable despite Thomas's leaner build and lighter eyes. "Your brother," Naya said softly, studying the image, "didn't make it home." She handed back the tin with careful reverence. "You still carry him." "Only thing worth carrying," she nodded solemnly. "Then you understand what means to keep ghost." The night deepened around them, the cave's entrance framing a patch of star-filled sweet. They kept the fire small, just enough to ward off the mountain chill without risking detection. Gabriel took the first watch, positioning himself where he could observe the approach path while Naya slept. The stillness of the canyon at night amplified every sound, the soft hooting of an owl, the distant cry of a coyote, the whisper of wind through juniper. It was in such quiet moments that Gabriel felt the weight of his choices most keenly. 3 years he'd spent in solitude by the river, haunted by Thomas's death and his own survival. Now, in the space of 2 days, he'd thrown himself back into the world's conflicts for a woman he barely knew. Yet something about Naya's presence felt right, as though the river had delivered her to his door for a purpose. When the moon reached its zenith, Naya stirred, coming to sit beside him at the cave's entrance. They watched the stars in companionable silence until she spoke. "My grandmother teach. Stars are ancestor spirits," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Each light, one soul watching over us." Gabriel followed her gaze to the vast swath of the Milky Way, bright as spilled silver against the velvet black. "That's a lot of ancestors." "Many generations," she agreed. "Many stories." "What's your story, Naya?" he asked gently. "The real one." She drew a deep breath, her profile sharp against the night sky. "I born to medicine people. My mother die when I small. Grandmother teach me healing ways, plants, songs, spirit talk." Her fingers unconsciously touched the small pouch at her waist. "When soldiers come, grandmother hide me in cave like this. I watch them kill her. Say she witch because she not fear them." Gabriel remained silent, recognizing the rare gift of her trust. "After I live with many people, work, learn English, then meet Marcus Thorne, old prospector. He kind, needs someone cook, clean camp, pay fair." Her expression darkened. "But partner Boone, he different, bad spirit. When Marcus find gold in hills, Boone change. More angry, more hungry." She turned to face Gabriel fully. "Gold not in ground where white men think. It in sacred place, burial grounds of my mother's people. Old ones buried with treasures, things for journey to Star Road. Marcus not know this, but Boone," her voice hardened, "Boone capture old man from my mother's tribe, torture him for location." Understanding dawned. "The gold in your pouch," Naya nodded. "Not just gold, sacred things taken from graves. I go to camp at night, take back what's stolen. But Boone catch me leaving." Her hand drifted to her wounded shoulder. "I shoot him when he grab me, not know if he live or die, only run." The confession hung between them, weighty with implications. By helping Naya, Gabriel wasn't just harboring a fugitive. He was taking sides in a deeper conflict between worlds. "If I die," she said suddenly, "will you tell truth about me?" The question caught him off guard with its directness. "Only if I live long enough to know it," he answered honestly. That pulled a small, sad smile from her. River not just remember, river also carry. Wash away what need cleaning, keep what need keeping. "Let's give it something worth remembering," Gabriel declared, surprised by his own conviction. Dawn came pale and cold, washing the canyon in pearl gray light. Gabriel had just returned from scouting their immediate surroundings when he found Naya kneeling by their small fire, her expression troubled as she studied something in her hands. "Found this in your saddlebag," she said, holding up a folded newspaper. "When getting jerky." Gabriel took the paper, a 3-month-old edition of the Arizona Sentinel. He'd forgotten he'd picked it up on his last reluctant trip to town. "What about it?" "Story here." She pointed to a small article on the back page. "About Apache scouts." Gabriel skimmed the article, a cold weight settling in his stomach as he read. It detailed a territorial investigation into allegations that a unit of Apache scouts had been massacred not by hostile tribes as officially reported, but by their own U.S. Army comrades following a dispute over gold discovered in the field. Thomas's unit. The article named no survivors but mentioned unconfirmed reports that 1 or 2 scouts had escaped the ambush. The story ended abruptly, cut off mid-sentence where the page had torn, leaving the conclusion missing. "This true?" Naya asked, watching his face closely. "I don't know," Gabriel admitted, his mind racing. The official report said hostiles attacked the patrol. This changes everything." He sat heavily on a rock, the newspaper trembling slightly in his hands. For 3 years, he'd lived with the military's account of Thomas's death, honored his memory based on a lie. If this article held truth, then his brother's killers weren't Apache raiders, but the very men he'd served alongside. "There's more," Naya said quietly. She hesitated, then added, "The old man Boone torture. Before he die, he speak of white soldier who lived with Apache after big killing. Man with eyes like sky. They call him Ghost Walker." Gabriel's head snapped up. Thomas had blue eyes, their gazes locked in shared realization. If there had been survivors of the massacre, if Thomas had somehow escaped, a sudden commotion outside shattered the moment. Storm's warning whinny echoed up from below, followed by the distinctive crack of a rifle shot. "They found us," Gabriel said, grabbing his weapon. They barely reached cover before bullets peppered the cave entrance, sending stone fragments flying. Gabriel counted at least 3 shooters from different positions. Reed and his men had returned with reinforcements. "Back of the cave," Gabriel ordered. "There might be another way out." Naya shook her head. "No other way, only forward." Another volley of shots kept them pinned down. Through a gap in the rocks, Gabriel could see Reed directing the others to spread out, cutting off any possible escape routes. "5 men now," he reported grimly. "They're trying to flank us." Naya's face was calm despite the danger, her hand steady on the knife at her belt. "What we do?" Gabriel assessed their situation with cold clarity. They had his rifle, a pistol with limited ammunition, and Naya's knife against 5 armed men. The cave offered protection, but also trapped them. Once their ammunition was spent, it would be over. "I'll hold them off," Gabriel decided. "Create an opening. You run for the horses." "No," Naya said firmly. "I not leave you. This isn't your fight. Became my fight when River bring me to you." Her eyes held his, unwavering. "We fight together, or die together." Something shifted in Gabriel's chest at her words, a recognition of a bond forged in danger and trust. He nodded once, accepting her choice. They positioned themselves on either side of the cave entrance, ready for the inevitable assault. Gabriel took careful aim at the nearest attacker, squeezing off a shot that sent the man scrambling for better cover. For several tense minutes, they exchanged fire with their pursuers, each shot carefully placed to conserve ammunition. Gabriel managed to wing one of the miners, sending him cursing back down the trail. But their situation grew more desperate with each passing moment as their bullets dwindled. "Last round," Gabriel warned, ejecting the spent casing from his rifle. Naya touched his arm, her expression resolute. "My people say, Death not end, only change. We face with courage. Gabriel met her gaze, finding strength in her calm certainty. If these were to be their final moments, he would meet them without fear. A shout from below broke the momentary lull. Not a battle cry, but a warning. Gunfire erupted, but this time not aimed at their position. Gabriel peered cautiously over the rocks to see Reed and his men taking cover as shots came from a new direction. "Someone else is shooting at them," he said, incredulous. The mysterious gunman moved with the skill of a seasoned fighter, using the terrain to deadly advantage. Within moments, two of Reed's men were down, and the others were retreating in disarray. Reed himself disappeared around a bend in the canyon, leaving his wounded behind. When the echoes of gunfire faded, a voice called up from below. "It's clear! Come down slowly! Hands visible!" Gabriel and Naya exchanged glances. The voice was male, commanding but not threatening. After a moment's hesitation, Gabriel called back, "We're coming out! Don't shoot!" They emerged cautiously from the cave, Gabriel leading the way with his empty rifle held high to show peaceful intent. Below, a lone figure stood among the scattered rocks, rifle lowered but ready. He wore a faded cavalry jacket modified with Apache leggings, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat and a bandana pulled up to his eyes. As they made their way down the precarious path, the stranger kept watch on the canyon entrances, alert for any return of Reed's men. When they reached the bottom, he motioned them toward a cluster of boulders that offered cover. "We need to move quickly," the man said, his voice carrying a hint of southern drawl beneath its urgency. "Reed will be back with more men from the mining camp." "Who are you?" Gabriel demanded, keeping Naya slightly behind him. Instead of answering, the stranger reached up and slowly lowered his bandana. Gabriel felt the world tilt beneath him. The face was leaner, weathered by sun and hardship, with a scar that hadn't been there before. But the eyes, those sky-blue eyes that mirrored his own, were unmistakable. "Thomas?" he whispered, his voice cracking on the name he hadn't spoken aloud in years. The man nodded once, his expression a complex mixture of shame and relief. "Hello, brother." For a moment, neither moved. Then Gabriel stepped forward, pulling Thomas into a fierce embrace that bridged the years of absence and grief. When they separated, both men's eyes shone with unshed tears. "You're alive," Gabriel said, still struggling to believe the evidence before him. "All this time—" "Gabriel," Thomas whispered, voice breaking. "Every day for 3 years I wanted to come home. Every night I'd dream of telling you I was alive." His eyes filled with tears. "But I couldn't face you. Not after I failed to save those men. How could I return when better men than me died because I couldn't stop it?" Gabriel gripped his brother's shoulders. "You survived to tell their story, to bring justice. There's no failure in that." Thomas glanced nervously down the canyon. "It's a long story and one we don't have time for right now. We need to reach safer ground before Reed brings reinforcements." They retrieved Storm and Thomas's horse, a paint Mustang with alert eyes and scarred flanks. As they rode deeper into the canyon network, following trails only Thomas seemed to know, Gabriel struggled to reconcile the ghost he'd mourned with the flesh and blood man riding beside him. His brother was alive. The thought repeated itself in Gabriel's mind like a prayer or a curse, too monumental to fully comprehend. 3 years of grief and whiskey-soaked nights. 3 years of nightmares and solitude, all built on a lie. "You knew about Thomas," Gabriel said to Naya as they rode, the realization dawning. "When you mentioned Ghostwalker," she nodded, her expression solemn. "Stories reach my people. Man with blue eyes who walks with Apache after great betrayal. I not know he your brother until you show picture." By nightfall, they'd reached a hidden valley accessible only through a narrow pass that could be easily defended. A small creek provided fresh water, and the surrounding cliffs offered protection from both elements and enemies. Thomas led them to a crude shelter built against the cliff face, a brush wickiup in the Apache style with a small fire pit before it. It was clearly a place he'd used before, a way station in his hidden life. As they settled around the fire, Thomas built. The weight of unasked questions hung heavy in the air. Finally, Gabriel broke the silence. "The army told me you were dead, killed by Apache raiders." Thomas's face hardened. The army lied. There were no hostile Apache that day, only greedy men with badges and bars. He poked at the fire, watching sparks rise into the darkening sky. It started with gold, doesn't it always? Our patrol found an Apache burial site while tracking. Ancient place hidden in the hills. The scouts with us wanted to leave it undisturbed. Sacred ground, they said. His voice grew distant, lost in memory. Colonel Monroe had other ideas. Ordered the graves opened, artifacts taken, including gold funerary objects. When our Apache scouts protested, things escalated. Monroe? Gabriel interrupted. Any relation to Ezra Monroe? Thomas's eyes narrowed. His father. The colonel gave the order, but it was the son who enjoyed carrying it out. He glanced at Naya. Ezra was always the cruelest of the bunch. What happened to the patrol? Gabriel pressed. Monroe labeled the scouts as mutineers, had his loyal men open fire. Thomas's hand unconsciously touched a scar visible at his collar. I tried to stop it, took a bullet for my trouble. They left me for dead alongside our Apache brothers. He fell silent, the horror of that day evident in his eyes. 2 scouts survived besides me, Running Fox and Black Knife. They carried me to their people, who healed me despite knowing I was cavalry. I've lived among them since, trying to make amends in what small ways I can. And you never thought to let me know you were alive. Gabriel couldn't keep the hurt from his voice. Thomas met his gaze directly. I wanted to. God knows I did. But Monroe and his son were hunting any witnesses. I couldn't risk bringing that danger to your door. He looked down, and part of me was ashamed. Ashamed I couldn't save the others. Shamed to face you after failing so completely. The honesty in his brother's voice struck Gabriel to the core. He recognized the weight of such shame. Hadn't he carried similar burdens since the war? The men hunting Naya, Gabriel said, making connections. They're after the same gold, aren't they? Thomas nodded grimly. It started as greed, but it's grown into something far worse. He poked at the fire, watching embers rise. Colonel Monroe, Ezra's father, was once territorial governor, with connections all the way to Washington. After the war, he built a political dynasty on his heroic military service and pacification of hostile tribes. And the son inherited it all, Gabriel observed. More than inherited. Ezra's planning to run for Senate next year. Thomas's voice hardened. He's been systematically looting Apache burial grounds, using the gold to finance his campaign and buy influence. The papers call him a visionary of the West, a man bringing civilization to the frontier. While desecrating graves and murdering innocents, Gabriel said bitterly. Thomas nodded. The colonel's journal documents everything. The massacre of our patrol, the looting, the cover-up. If that evidence reaches the right people. He glanced meaningfully at Naya. When word reached Ezra that someone had stolen sacred items from his camp, items that could connect him to these crimes, he didn't just want the gold back. He needed to eliminate every witness. But why risk everything to chase us? Gabriel pressed. He must know this only increases his chances of exposure. Because he can't stop, Naya interjected softly. Men like Monroe believe they above law, chosen by destiny. To admit defeat would break spell they cast on themselves. Her eyes met Gabriel's. Also, election comes soon. If story breaks before votes cast, empire his father built crumbles to dust. And he'd rather kill us all than let that happen, Thomas finished. A man that close to power won't let anything stand in his way. Not justice, not law, and certainly not us. Monroe's father was territorial governor before he died, Thomas explained. The son has ambitions for Washington, a Senate seat, maybe more. This scandal would destroy everything his family built. That's why he can't let any witnesses live. Gabriel absorbed this, the full scope of their situation becoming clear. They weren't just running from a local posse or angry miners. They were threatening a powerful man's carefully constructed empire of corruption and political ambition. Gabriel absorbed this, the full scope of their situation becoming clear. They weren't just running from a local posse or angry miners. They were threatening a powerful man's carefully constructed empire of corruption. What's your plan? He asked finally. Thomas exchanged glances with Naya before answering. Get Naya and the sacred items back to her people. Then find someone in the territorial government who isn't in Monroe's pocket. Someone who'll listen to the truth about what happened to our patrol. Dangerous, Naya observed quietly. Very, Thomas agreed. Monroe has men everywhere, and Reed is one of his best trackers. They'll be hunting us with everything they've got. Gabriel considered their options. The safest course would be to flee north, perhaps all the way to Colorado territory, but that would mean abandoning any hope of justice for Thomas's fallen comrades or protection for the Apache burial grounds still vulnerable to Monroe's greed. His eyes met Naya's across the fire. What do you want to do? She held his gaze steadily. My people say, sometimes river must flood to heal land. Wrath like river, painful but necessary. Her answer settled something in Gabriel's chest. Then we face this together, all of us. Thomas looked between them, a faint smile touching his lips. You've changed, brother. The Gabriel I knew would have ridden for the border at the first sign of trouble. The Gabriel you knew died thinking he'd lost his brother, he replied simply. The river brought someone new to take his place. As the night deepened around them, the three unlikely allies planned their next move. Thomas knew of a territorial judge in Prescott who had a reputation for incorruptibility. If they could reach him with evidence of Monroe's crimes, there might be a chance for justice. But first, they needed to survive long enough to make the journey. Monroe would have men watching all the main trails, and the spring floods had made many routes impassable. We'll need to cross back over the river, Thomas concluded. It's the last place they'll expect us to go. River's still high, Naya warned. Dangerous crossing. I know a place, Gabriel said, where the river narrows through a gorge. I built a small dam upstream to protect my land. If it's held, the water might be low enough to ford. Thomas nodded. We'll leave at first light. Try to put as much distance between us and Monroe's men as possible. As they settled for the night, Gabriel found himself unable to sleep, his mind racing with all that had transpired. He stepped outside the shelter, finding Naya already there, her face turned up to the stars. You should rest, he said, moving to stand beside her. Too many thoughts, she replied, like birds before storm. Gabriel understood the feeling all too well. Thank you, he said after a moment, for not telling me about Thomas right away. It would have been too much. She nodded, acknowledging his gratitude. Some truths need right time, like seed needs right season. They stood in companionable silence, the night sounds of the hidden valley creating a peaceful backdrop to their troubled thoughts. In my tongue, Nahimana means mystic, she said suddenly, one who walks between worlds. Grandmothers say I born with veil over face, sign of one who sees what others cannot. Gabriel considered this. Is that why you weren't surprised to find Thomas alive? You saw it somehow? She smiled faintly. Not see with eyes, feel with spirit. River brought me to you a reason. Now understand why. And what reason is that? Her expression grew serious. To heal what broken, in you and Thomas, in sacred places violated. She touched the pouch at her waist. These things not just gold, they keys to ancestors' rest. Without them, spirits wander, bring misfortune. The weight of responsibility in her words struck Gabriel. This wasn't just about clearing Thomas's name or exposing Monroe's crimes. It was about restoring balance to a world thrown into chaos by greed and violence. If I die, will you tell truth about me? Naya asked suddenly, echoing her earlier question. This time, Gabriel's answer came with certainty. You're not going to die. We'll see this through together. She studied his face in the moonlight, something softening in her expression. You good man, Gabriel Hayes. Better than you know. The simple affirmation touched something long dormant in Gabriel's heart, a belief that perhaps his life still held purpose beyond mere survival. As dawn approached, a sense of resolve settled over him. Whatever dangers lay ahead, whatever truths remained to be discovered, Gabriel knew he had found something worth fighting for. Not just Thomas or Naya, but the chance to make right what had gone so terribly wrong. The river had taken much from him over the years. Perhaps now it was time for the river to give something back. The rising sun painted the canyon walls in hues of amber and gold as the three riders picked their way down a game trail toward the river. Gabriel led, with Naya riding behind him on Storm, and Thomas bringing up the rear on his paint Mustang. They moved in tense silence, alert to any sign of pursuit. The river came into view as they rounded a bend, a roaring beast still swollen with floodwaters, though noticeably lower than days before. Gabriel studied the crossing point with a critical eye. Where the water funneled between two rock formations, the current ran fast but relatively shallow over a gravel bar. There, he pointed. That's our best chance. Thomas dismounted to test the depth with a long branch. Chest high on the horses at the deepest point. We can make it if we're careful. Naya's expression was grim as she gazed at the churning water. The river that had nearly claimed her life now stood between them and safety. Gabriel noticed her unease and moved Storm alongside her. "Stay close to me," he said quietly. "Storm's a strong swimmer. He won't let you go under." She nodded, her knuckles white where she gripped the saddle horn. "River remembers last time." "This time is different," Gabriel assured her. "This time we cross together." They entered the water in single file, Thomas leading his horse first to test the footing. The animals stepped cautiously, sensing the power of the current pulling at their legs. As they reached the middle, the water rose to the horses' withers, forcing them to swim briefly before finding purchase again on the submerged gravel bar. Gabriel kept one arm around Naya's waist, anchoring her to the saddle as Storm fought the current. The horse snorted in strained, powerful muscles working against the river's pull. For a heart-stopping moment, they slipped sideways, the current threatening to sweep them downstream. But Storm recovered, lunging forward toward the shallows on the far side. When they finally reached the bank, all three were soaked and breathing hard, but alive. Thomas scanned the horizon, wary of watchers. "We need to keep moving," he said. "Monroe's men will expect us to head west toward Prescott. We'll go east first, then circle back once we've lost them." They rode hard through the morning, following game trails and dry washes to avoid leaving obvious tracks. By midday, they'd reached a wooded ridge overlooking a vast expanse of high desert. In the distance, a plume of dust marked the movement of riders. At least 6, moving fast. "Monroe's gathered a posse," Thomas observed grimly. "They're heading toward your cabin, Gabriel." Gabriel's jaw tightened at the thought of Monroe's men ransacking his home, the one place he'd found peace after the war. Yet strange as it seemed, the loss didn't cut as deeply as it once might have. The cabin was just walls and a roof. What mattered now rode beside him. "Let them waste time there," he said. "We keep moving." They traveled through the afternoon, pushing the horses as much as they dared. Naya prepared a poultice during a brief rest stop, treating Storm's leg to prevent the strain of travel from worsening his injury. Her hands moved with practiced confidence, her low voice soothing the nervous animal. "You have gift with horses," Gabriel remarked, watching her work. "All creatures speak same language," she replied. "Fear, trust, pain, love. Listen with heart, not ears." The simple wisdom reminded Gabriel of Thomas in his younger days, before the war had hardened them both. His brother had always possessed an intuitive understanding of animals and people alike, a gift their father had dismissed as useless sentimentality. As they prepared to move on, Thomas approached, his expression troubled. "Monroe's men have split up, 3 riders heading this way." "They've picked up our trail," Gabriel concluded. Thomas nodded. "We need to create a false lead, buy some time." They quickly devised a plan. Thomas would take Naya's pouch and ride east, leaving obvious signs for the trackers to follow. Meanwhile, Gabriel and Naya would continue north toward Prescott on a more difficult route that would conceal their passage. "We'll rendezvous at Chapel Rock in 2 days," Thomas said, carefully securing the sacred pouch inside his jacket. "If I'm not there by sunset, don't wait." Gabriel gripped his brother's shoulder. "Don't make me lose you twice." Thomas managed a tight smile. "Not planning on it, brother." As Thomas mounted up, Naya approached him, speaking softly in Apache. Thomas responded in kind, their exchange brief but evidently meaningful. When she stepped back, her face was solemn. "What did you tell him?" Gabriel asked as they watched Thomas ride away, deliberately leaving tracks in the soft earth. "Old prayer for protection," Naya replied, and promised to watch over his brother. They waited until Thomas had disappeared over the ridge before setting out on their own path. Gabriel led them up a rocky stream bed where their horses would leave no prints, then across a stretch of hard-pan desert that held no tracks. By nightfall, they'd reached a small, box canyon with enough vegetation for the horses and a defensible position for themselves. As Gabriel built a small, smokeless fire, Naya gathered herbs from the sparse vegetation clinging to the canyon walls. The day's long ride had reopened her shoulder wound, though she'd made no complaint. When she returned to the fire, Gabriel insisted on checking the injury. Infection starting, he noted, cleaning the wound as gently as he could. We need to draw it out. Naya directed him in preparing a poultice from the plants she'd gathered, grinding them to paste with water from their canteens. The sharp medicinal scent filled the air as she applied the mixture to her shoulder, her face tight with pain, but determined. Thank you, she said as Gabriel helped bind the poultice in place with a clean strip of cloth. For everything. The simple gratitude in her voice touched him deeply. I should be thanking you, he replied. If you hadn't come down river that day. You still alone, she finished, with ghost of brother. Gabriel nodded, the truth of her words settling into him. The river gives and takes. They ate a sparse meal of jerky and the last of the cornbread, conserving their supplies for the journey ahead. As night deepened around them, the stars emerged, brilliant and countless in the desert sky. Gabriel found himself remembering Naya's words about ancestors watching from above. You think they're really up there? He asked, gesturing to the glittering expanse. The ones who've gone before? Naya followed his gaze upward. My people believe great warriors become stars. Their fires light way for those still walking. Other spirits return to earth, become wind, rock, river. She glanced at him. What's your people believe? Gabriel considered the question. My mother believed in heaven, a peaceful place where souls rest. My father didn't believe in anything beyond what he could touch. He paused. The war made it hard to believe in anything at all. And now? He looked at her, her profile silhouetted against the fire's glow. Now I wonder if your grandmother was right about the river remembering. Maybe everything we lose finds its way back somehow. She smiled faintly. That good thought. Hope thought. As the fire burned low, Gabriel took first watch, positioning himself where he could observe both the canyon entrance and Naya's sleeping form. The responsibility he felt toward her had deepened beyond mere obligation into something he wasn't yet ready to name. Hours passed in vigilant silence. The moon rose, casting silver light across the canyon floor. Gabriel was about to wake Naya for her turn at watch when a subtle movement at the canyon entrance caught his eye. He froze, hand moving slowly to his rifle. A figure stood in the shadows, too small for a man, its outline indistinct against the darkness. As Gabriel watched, it seemed to drift rather than walk, moving with uncanny silence across the rocky ground. Who's there? He called, raising his rifle. The figure stopped, then moved forward into a patch of moonlight. Gabriel's breath caught. It was a young Apache boy, perhaps 10 or 11, dressed in traditional garb that appeared oddly luminous in the moonlight. Hagoni, the boy said, his voice carrying a strange echo. Nihi e dine e no si do. Before Gabriel could respond, Naya was beside him, fully alert despite having been asleep moments before. She stared at the boy, her expression a mixture of awe and understanding. Hagone shiazi, she replied softly. Nihi e niha naniti du. The boy nodded once, then turned and walked back toward the canyon entrance. When he reached the shadows, he seemed to dissolve into them, disappearing from view. What just happened? Gabriel asked, his voice hushed. Who was that? Messenger, Naya answered, her eyes still fixed on the spot where the boy had vanished. Spirit child, he say danger coming. We must go now. Gabriel wanted to question further, to understand what he had just witnessed, but the urgency in Naya's voice compelled him to action. They quickly gathered their meager belongings and saddled Storm, slipping out of the canyon under the cover of darkness. They rode north through the night, navigating by starlight across the rugged terrain. Naya led now, moving with the confidence of one guided by more than mortal senses. Gabriel followed, his mind still grappling with the ghostly encounter. The boy, he said when they paused to rest the horse. He was real? Real as dream, Naya replied. Real as memory. She touched her poultice, wincing slightly. In our belief, she explained, when great injustice happens, ancestors send messengers, spirits of children who died before their time. They walk between worlds, warning those who fight for balance. She looked up at the night sky. My grandmother taught when Spirit Child appears, fate is gathering like storm clouds. Gabriel thought of Thomas's tale of massacre and stolen artifacts, of burial grounds desecrated for gold, of a corrupt system that protected the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. Perhaps there were forces at work beyond his understanding, forces that had brought Naya to his door and returned his brother from the dead. Gabriel wanted to question further, to understand what he had just witnessed, but the urgency in Naya's voice compelled him to action. They quickly gathered their meager belongings and saddled Storm, slipping out of the canyon under the cover of darkness. They rode north through the night, navigating by starlight across the rugged terrain. Naya led now, moving with the confidence of one guided by more than mortal senses. Gabriel followed, his mind still grappling with the ghostly encounter. "The boy," he said when they paused to rest the horse. "He was real?" "Real as dream," Naya replied. "Real as memory." She touched her poultice, wincing slightly. Apache believe when great wrong done to people, spirits rise to help those who seek justice. Gabriel thought of Thomas's tale of massacre and stolen artifacts, of burial grounds desecrated for gold, of a corrupt system that protected the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. Perhaps there were forces at work beyond his understanding, forces that had brought Naya to his door and returned his brother from the dead. As dawn approached, they reached a series of steep mesas intersected by narrow canyons. Naya guided them to a hidden spring nestled at the base of the largest formation. The water bubbled up clear and cold from a crack in the stone, surrounded by a small oasis of vegetation. "Sacred water," she explained as Storm drank eagerly. "Healing place. We rest here until night." They concealed themselves among the rocks and scrub brush, taking turns keeping watch. Gabriel used the opportunity to clean and oil his weapons, preparing for whatever confrontation lay ahead. When he finished, he found Naya sitting cross-legged by the spring, her eyes closed in meditation or prayer. Not wanting to disturb her, he turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Sit, Gabriel Hayes. Water wants to speak to you too." He hesitated, then settled beside her at the spring's edge. The desert was beginning to heat with the rising sun, but here in the shade, the air remained cool and fresh. "Listen," Naya instructed, gesturing to the bubbling water. "Not with ears." Gabriel closed his eyes, feeling slightly foolish but willing to try on. First he heard only the gentle splash of water against stone. Then gradually other sensations emerged, the rhythm of the spring pulsing like a heartbeat, the whisper of wind through nearby branches, the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. It was as though the world had expanded around him, revealing layers of existence he normally filtered out. When he opened his eyes, Naya was watching him with a small smile. "What did you hear?" she asked. "Life," he answered simply. "Everywhere." She nodded, satisfied. "That most important medicine. Remember, we part of something bigger than our pain." The wisdom in her words struck Gabriel deeply. For 3 years, he'd existed in isolation. His world shrunk to the boundaries of his grief. Now, in the midst of danger and uncertainty, he felt more alive, more connected than he had since before the war. They rested through the heat of the day, conserving their strength for the journey ahead. As the sun began its descent, Gabriel checked Naya's wound, pleased to find the infection receding thanks to her herbal treatments. "We reach Chapel Rock by tomorrow?" she asked as he rebandaged her shoulder. "If we ride through the night," Gabriel confirmed. "It's dangerous territory, rugged and exposed, but it's our best chance to rendezvous with Thomas." Naya's face grew solemn. "Thomas in danger, I feel it." Gabriel wanted to dismiss her concern as mere worry, but after the night's ghostly encounter, he couldn't discount her intuition. All the more reason to reach him quickly. They set out as twilight deepened into dusk, Storm moving with renewed energy after the day's rest. The terrain grew increasingly challenging as they navigated the mesa country, steep slopes and narrow passes that required careful traversing even in daylight, let alone under the faint illumination of stars and a quarter moon. Near midnight, as they picked their way along a ridge overlooking a vast expanse of desert, the distant crack of gunfire echoed across the landscape. Gabriel reined in Storm, listening intently. 3 shots in quick succession, then silence. "That came from the direction of Chapel Rock," he said grimly. "Thomas," Naya whispered, her face tightening with concern. They pushed forward with greater urgency, Gabriel guiding Storm down treacherous slopes and across dry washes. The terrain would have been impassable for a larger group, which gave them an advantage over any pursuing posse, but it also slowed their progress at a time when speed might mean the difference between life and death. Dawn was breaking when Chapel Rock finally came into view, a towering sandstone formation that resembled a church steeple rising from the desert floor. Gabriel scanned the area through his field glass, searching for any sign of Thomas or potential threats. Movement at the base, he reported, focusing the glass. One rider, moving slowly, injured. They approached cautiously, using the scattered boulders for cover. As they drew closer, Gabriel recognized the rider's faded cavalry jacket and slumped posture. "Thomas!" His brother turned at the sound of his voice, nearly falling from his saddle in the process. Blood stained his left side, and his face was gray with exhaustion and pain. Gabriel reached him just as he started to slide from the horse, catching him before he hit the ground. Thomas's skin was clammy with shock, his breathing shallow. "Monroe's men!" Thomas gasped as Gabriel lowered him gently to the shelter of a boulder. "Ambushed at dawn. Got 3. Rest followed me." Naya was already gathering materials for a poultice, her movements quick and precise. She cut away Thomas's blood-soaked shirt to reveal a bullet wound high on his side, perilously close to the lung. "How many following?" Gabriel asked, helping Naya clean the wound. 4, maybe 5. Thomas winced. "Reed leading them. They're not far behind." Gabriel's mind raced. Thomas was in no condition to travel, but staying meant certain confrontation with Monroe's men. They needed defensible ground and a strategy that would overcome their numerical disadvantage. Chapel Rock, he decided, looking up at the towering formation. "There's a cave system halfway up the western face. We can hold them off from there until help arrives." "What help?" Thomas asked weakly. "The spirits," Naya answered before Gabriel could respond. She was preparing a mixture of herbs and water, working with focused intensity. "They guide us this far, not abandoned now." Whether it was delirium from his wound or genuine belief, Thomas nodded. "Always trusted your medicine more than mine, Naya." She smiled faintly as she applied the poultice to his wound. "This stopped bleeding, clean poison, but need real healing soon." It took their combined strength to get Thomas up the steep path to the cave entrance. Inside, the space opened into a series of connected chambers, some bearing ancient pictographs similar to those in the spirit cave. A small seep at the back provided water, and the entrance offered a commanding view of the approaches. Gabriel positioned Thomas in the rear chamber, making him as comfortable as possible, before returning to the entrance to assess their tactical situation. The cave could be defended by one person, allowing the others to rest or attend to Thomas. But once Monroe's men arrived, they would be effectively trapped. "We make stand here," Naya said, joining him at the entrance. "Fight for truth." Gabriel nodded, touched by her unwavering courage. "We fight, but first, we prepare." They worked quickly to fortify their position, gathering loose stones to create firing positions and identifying potential weaknesses in their defense. Gabriel distributed their remaining ammunition, ensuring each of them had access to a weapon. By mid-morning, the first of Monroe's men appeared on the horizon, Reed and 4 others, pushing their horses hard despite the heat. Gabriel watched through the field glass as they discovered the blood trail leading to the base of Chapel Rock. "They've found us," he reported, spreading out to surround the formation. Naya knelt beside him, her expression calm but resolute. "How many bullets we have?" 23, Gabriel answered grimly. "Not enough for a prolonged siege." She touched the knife at her belt. Bullets, not only weapon. The first shots came as testing fire, probing their position, seeking to draw a return fire that would reveal their exact location. Gabriel held his discipline, watching as 2 men advanced up the path, while the others provided covering fire from different angles. When the lead man came within 30 yards of the cave entrance, Gabriel took careful aim and fired. The man tumbled backward with a cry, rolling down the steep slope. The second attacker retreated, scrambling for cover. A volley of shots peppered the cave entrance in response, forcing Gabriel and Naya to pull back deeper into the shadow of the opening. When the firing paused, Gabriel risked a quick look. Reed was directing the others to new positions, attempting to find angles that would allow them to fire into the cave without exposing themselves. "They're trying to flank us," Gabriel warned. "Watch the southern approach." The standoff continued through the morning, occasional exchanges of gunfire punctuating the desert silence. Gabriel and Naya took turns watching the entrance, while the other checked on Thomas, whose condition was deteriorating despite Naya's treatments. The wound had begun to fester, and fever flushed his skin. "He needs doctor," Naya said quietly as they changed the poultice. "Soon." Gabriel knew she was right, but their options were non-existent. They were pinned down with a critically wounded man, facing enemies who would show no mercy. The situation was growing increasingly desperate. As noon approached, bringing with it the full punishing heat of the desert, a new figure appeared at the base of Chapel Rock. Even from a distance, Gabriel recognized the broad-shouldered silhouette and distinctive hat. Ezra Monroe himself had joined the hunt. Through the field glass, Gabriel studied the man who had orchestrated so much suffering. Monroe was younger than he'd expected, perhaps 35, with a neatly trimmed beard and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. He moved with confidence, directing his men with casual gestures as though arranging pieces on a chessboard. "That him?" Naya asked, her voice hardening. "Monroe?" Gabriel nodded, passing her the glass. She looked briefly, then handed it back, her expression unchanged but for a new intensity in her eyes. "He man who torture old one," she said, "who desecrate sacred places, who try kill Thomas. And now he's come to finish what he started," Gabriel added grimly. A shout from below drew their attention. Monroe had stepped forward, hands raised in a gesture of parley. "Hayes," he called up, "I know you're up there. Let's talk like civilized men." Gabriel exchanged glances with Naya, who nodded slightly. He moved to the cave entrance, careful to stay within the shadows. "What's to talk about, Monroe?" he shouted back. "Your men tried to kill my brother. Again." Monroe's laugh carried easily in the still desert air. "Ah, so Thomas is with you. I suspected as much when Reed described the ambush." He took another step forward. "I'm offering terms, Hayes. Send down the Apache woman and the artifacts she stole, and you and your brother can ride away. No one else needs to die today." "Like your Apache scouts didn't need to die," Gabriel countered. "Or the old man you tortured for the location of the burial grounds?" A brief silence followed, then Monroe's voice returned, harder now. "You don't understand the larger picture, Hayes. This territory needs men of vision, men who can harness its resources for progress. A few savages and their superstitions can't be allowed to stand in the way." "You're right about one thing," Gabriel called back. "I don't understand men who murder and steal in the name of progress, and I sure as hell don't make deals with them." Monroe's response was immediate and predictable, a signal to his men that sent bullets ricocheting off the rocks around the cave entrance. Gabriel pulled back, rejoining Naya in the deeper shadows. "He not man who compromises," she observed. "No," Gabriel agreed, "and neither are we." The afternoon dragged on, the heat building inside the cave until the air seemed to shimmer. They rationed their water carefully, most going to Thomas, whose fever continued to climb. Gabriel and Naya took turns firing carefully placed shots to keep Monroe's men at bay, but their ammunition dwindled with each exchange. During a lull in the firing, Thomas called weakly from the rear chamber. Gabriel went to him, finding his brother lucid despite the fever. "Listen," Thomas said, gripping Gabriel's arm with surprising strength. "In my saddlebag, there's a journal, Colonel Monroe's journal. I took it after the massacre." Gabriel's eyes widened. "Evidence?" Thomas nodded, wincing at the movement. "Names, dates, locations, everything about the burial grounds, the gold taken, orders to eliminate witnesses." He swallowed with difficulty. "If I don't make it, you'll make it," Gabriel interrupted firmly. "If I don't," Thomas insisted, "that journal needs to reach Judge Harmon in Prescott. He's the only one with enough authority and integrity to act on it." Gabriel clasped his brother's hand. "We'll get it there. Together." Thomas's eyes drifted closed, exhaustion claiming him once more. Gabriel checked the wound, grimacing at the angry red streaks spreading outward from the poultice. Without proper medical attention soon, Thomas would not survive. When Gabriel returned to the cave entrance, he found Naya watching the desert with unusual intensity. The sun had begun its descent, painting the landscape in deepening gold. "They're planning something," she said without turning, moving to new positions. Gabriel scanned the terrain below. Monroe's men had indeed shifted, gathering on the western side of the formation where the slope was steepest, but offered the most cover for an approach. They're going to rush us at dusk, he concluded, when the light works against us. They had perhaps an hour before the assault would begin. Gabriel checked their ammunition. 12 bullets remained, not enough to repel a coordinated attack by 5 determined men. Thomas has evidence, he told Naya quickly, a journal documenting everything Monroe did. If we can get it to Prescott, it ends all of this. Her eyes met his, understanding the implications immediately. One must go, one must stay. The choice was impossible. Thomas needed protection in his vulnerable state, but someone had to break through Monroe's men with the journal. Either way, those who remained at the cave faced near certain death. I'll go, Gabriel decided. You know herbs, healing. Thomas has better chance with you. Naya's response was immediate. Her dark eyes held a determination that brooked no argument as she shook her head firmly. I go. Smaller, faster. No land better. She touched the knife at her belt. Can move like shadow. They expect man, not woman. Gabriel wanted to argue, but her logic was sound. Monroe's men would be watching for him, a large man on a large horse. Naya, small and skilled in desert travel, might slip past them in the gathering dusk. Thomas's horse is faster than Storm, he conceded reluctantly. But the journal, show me, she insisted. Gabriel retrieved the journal from Thomas's saddlebag, a weathered leather volume filled with precise military handwriting. He showed Naya how to find the most damning passages, the ones that detailed the massacre and subsequent cover-up. Judge Harmon, she repeated, committing the name to memory. Prescott, 2 days' ride west. As the sun touched the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, they made final preparations. Gabriel gave Naya most of their remaining ammunition and water. In return, she left him additional herbs for Thomas's wound and precise instructions for their use. Wait until full dark, Gabriel instructed. I'll create a diversion on the north side. When you hear the shooting, ride hard to the south. Naya nodded, her face solemn in the fading light. They stood at the cave entrance, the weight of parting heavy between them. Without warning, she reached up and touched his face gently, her fingers cool against his sun-warmed skin. If I not return, she said softly, remember what River gave, not what it took. Before Gabriel could respond, she disappeared into the shadows of the rear chamber to wait for nightfall. He turned back to the cave entrance, watching as the last light drained from the sky and stars began to appear. Ancestors watching, if Naya's belief held true. Thomas stirred as Gabriel checked his wound once more. His eyes opened, clearer than before despite the fever. Naya's going, he stated, reading Gabriel's expression. With the journal, Gabriel confirmed. I'm staying with you. Thomas managed a weak smile. Stubborn as always, brother. Learned from the best. As full darkness settled over Chapel Rock, Gabriel prepared for his diversion. He gathered what combustible material he could find and fashioned crude torches from strips of cloth soaked in gun oil. When the moment came, he would light them and throw them down the northern slope, creating the impression of an attempted breakout. The wait was excruciating. Each minute that passed brought both the hope of Naya's escape and the dread of discovery. Gabriel strained his ears for any sound that might indicate Monroe's men making their move. When it came, the attack was swift and coordinated. Gunfire erupted from multiple positions, bullets striking the cave entrance in a deadly pattern designed to keep defenders pinned down while others advanced. Gabriel returned fire sparingly, choosing his shots with care to maximize impact while preserving ammunition. He caught glimpses of dark figures moving up the slope, using the boulders for cover. One fell to his rifle, but the others continued their advance with determined precision. They were professionals, likely former soldiers like Reed, and they knew their business. When they were within 50 yards of the cave, Gabriel lit his improvised torches and hurled them down the northern slope. The dry brush caught immediately, flames leaping high in the darkness. As he'd hoped, the fire drew attention and fire from Monroe's men, momentarily diverting them from the southern approach. In that brief window of confusion, Gabriel caught sight of a shadow moving swiftly down the southern slope. Naya bent low over the paint horse's neck, riding hard toward the open desert. A shot rang out as one of Monroe's men spotted her, but the bullet went wide and then she was gone, swallowed by the darkness. Gabriel allowed himself a moment of fierce joy before turning back to the grim business of defense. The diversion had worked, but at a cost. Monroe's men now pressed their attack with renewed vigor, aware that someone had escaped. A bullet grazed Gabriel's arm as he fired at a figure moving between boulders. He fell back deeper into the cave, checking his rifle. 3 rounds remaining, plus 2 in his revolver. Not enough to hold off the determined assault much longer. "Thomas," he called, moving to the rear chamber. "We need to—" The words died in his throat. Thomas was gone. For a disorienting moment, Gabriel thought his brother must have somehow left the cave. Then a sound from deeper in the chamber drew his attention. A narrow crevice in the rear wall, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through, opened into darkness. Thomas had found another way out. Gabriel followed, ducking into the crevice and feeling his way along a winding passage that sloped upward. The air grew fresher as he advanced, and after 20 yards of claustrophobic navigation, he emerged onto a small ledge near the summit of Chapel Rock. Thomas lay there, breathing heavily from the exertion, his wound bleeding afresh. But his eyes were alert, and he gestured urgently for Gabriel to join him. "There's a path," he whispered, pointing to a nearly invisible trail that zigzagged down the eastern face of the formation, away from Monroe's men. "Old Apache escape route, Naya showed me." Gabriel helped Thomas to his feet, supporting his weight as they began the treacherous descent. Each step threatened disaster on the narrow trail, made more dangerous by darkness in Thomas's weakened state. But the alternative was certain death at Monroe's hands, so they pressed on, one painful yard at a time. They were halfway down when shouts from above indicated Monroe's men had discovered the empty cave. Flashlights swept the rock face, searching for signs of their escape. Gabriel and Thomas pressed themselves against the cliff, using a slight overhang for cover. "They'll figure it out soon enough," Thomas breathed. "We need to reach the horses." At the base of the eastern slope, 2 horses were tethered in the shadow of a boulder. Storm and one of Monroe's mounts, apparently left as a reserve. Naya had thought of everything, Gabriel realized with admiration. The final descent was the most harrowing, exposed to potential sighting despite the darkness. Thomas stumbled once, nearly dragging them both down the steep incline, but Gabriel's grip held firm. When they finally reached level ground, Thomas was barely conscious, the last of his strength expended in the escape. Gabriel lifted his brother onto Storm, then mounted behind him, supporting Thomas's limp form against his chest. The other horse he cut loose; it would serve as a distraction, running free as they made their escape. They rode east into the desert night, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and Chapel Rock. Thomas drifted in and out of consciousness, his fevered mutterings punctuated by moments of lucidity in which he directed Gabriel toward a place he called the Medicine Caves. "Naya's people," he explained during one such moment. "They'll help, if we can reach them." Dawn found them in a maze of narrow canyons, the rising sun painting the high walls in brilliant orange and gold. Storm was tiring, his gait slowing despite Gabriel's urgent need for speed. Thomas's condition had worsened, his skin burning with fever while his extremities grew cold. Signs Gabriel recognized all too well from battlefield hospitals. "How much further?" he asked as they paused at a small seep to water the horse. "Not far," Thomas rasped. "Through the Needle, then north to the Painted Cliffs." They pressed on, navigating by Thomas's intermittent directions and Gabriel's instinct. The Needle proved to be a narrow slot canyon, barely wide enough for horse and riders to pass through the single file. Beyond it, the landscape opened into a hidden valley, lush with unexpected vegetation, cottonwoods and willows nourished by an underground spring. At the far end of the valley, a series of caves dotted a cliff face marked with faded pictographs in red and yellow ochre. As they approached, figures emerged from the largest cave. Apache men with rifles raised cautiously. Gabriel reined in Storm, raising one hand in a gesture of peace while supporting Thomas with the other. "My brother needs help," he called out. "Naya sent us." The name acted as a password. The men lowered their weapons and moved forward, helping to lift Thomas gently from the horse. They carried him toward the cave, speaking rapidly in Apache as women emerged to assist. An elderly man approached Gabriel, his weathered face solemn beneath a shock of white hair. "I am Running Fox," he said in accented English. "Thomas speaks of you, brother who mourns him as dead." Gabriel nodded, too exhausted for elaborate explanations. "He's badly wounded. Can you help him?" Running Fox gestured toward the cave. Our medicine's strong, but Thomas walks close to Spirit Road now. Must hurry. Inside, the cave opened into a large chamber illuminated by fire and filtered sunlight from smoke holes in the ceiling. Thomas had been laid on a bed of clean hides, where women were already removing his bandages and examining his wound. The smell of herbal preparations filled the air, similar to what Naya had used but more complex, more potent. Gabriel watched as the Apache healers worked, their movements precise and unhurried, despite the urgency of Thomas's condition. Running Fox stood beside him, a steadying presence in the midst of uncertainty. "Your brother brave man," the elder said quietly. "After massacre, he stay with us, learn our ways, fight to protect sacred places when your government do nothing." "Monroe will come looking for us," Gabriel warned. "He won't stop until he has what he wants." Running Fox's expression hardened. "Monroe is disease that spreads. Must be cut out." He studied Gabriel's face. "Naya believes you man who can do this. Man who remembers what river gives, not just what it takes." The echo of Naya's words sent a chill through Gabriel. "Have you seen her? Has she passed this way?" The elder shook his head. "Not yet, but Nahimana knows many paths. If she lives, she will find way." If she lives, the words hung in the air between them, acknowledging the danger of her mission. Gabriel pushed away the fear that threatened to overwhelm him. Naya was resourceful, determined. If anyone could reach Prescott with the journal, it was her. "Rest now," Running Fox advised, gesturing to a corner where clean blankets had been laid out. "Long journey still ahead." Exhaustion claimed Gabriel almost as soon as he stretched out on the blankets. He fell into a deep sleep punctuated by vivid dreams, the river rising, Thomas standing on the far bank, Naya's voice calling from somewhere he couldn't see. When he woke, the quality of light in the cave had changed, suggesting several hours had passed. He rose stiffly, making his way to where Thomas lay. To his surprise and relief, his brother's condition had improved markedly. The angry red streaks had receded from around his wound, and though he still slept, his breathing was deeper and more regular. "The fever breaks," said a soft voice beside him. An Apache woman, perhaps his own age, stood mixing herbs in a small bowl. "Your brother's strong. Fight hard to stay in this world." Gabriel nodded his thanks. "How long was I asleep?" "Sun rises, falls, rises again," she replied. 2 days. 2 days. Naya could have reached Prescott by now or been captured by Monroe's men. There was no way to know which fate had claimed her. Running Fox entered the cave, his expression grave. "Riders coming," he announced. "Many horses. Monroe brings war." Gabriel followed him outside, where Apache men were already taking up defensive positions among the rocks overlooking the valley entrance. Through a borrowed field glass, Gabriel counted at least 15 riders approaching. Monroe had indeed gathered a small army. "We can't fight that many," Gabriel said. "Not without risking everyone here." Running Fox's face was impassive. "We fight when we must, hide when we can." He pointed to a narrow trail leading up the cliff face behind the caves. "If battle goes bad, our people escape that way. Been so for many generations." Gabriel weighed their options. With Thomas still too weak to travel, fleeing wasn't possible. Standing their ground meant potential massacre if Monroe's superior numbers overwhelmed the Apache defenders. A young scout raced into the camp, speaking rapidly in Apache. Running Fox listened, then turned to Gabriel. "More riders coming from west," he translated. "Not Monroe's men, soldiers, maybe 20. Gabriel's heart leaped. "Cavalry? From Fort Whipple?" Running Fox nodded. "With woman rider, Apache woman. Naya. She'd made it to Prescott, convinced the authorities to act on the evidence in Thomas's journal. Help was coming, if they could hold out long enough. We need to delay Monroe," Gabriel decided. "Keep him talking until the cavalry arrives." As Monroe's men entered the valley, Gabriel positioned himself on a rock outcropping visible from below, but protected from direct fire. Running Fox and his warriors remained hidden, rifles ready but unseen. Ezra Monroe rode at the head of his men, his bearing as confident as it had been at Chapel Rock. He reined in when he spotted Gabriel, raising a hand to halt his followers. "Hayes," he called up, "I see you found friends. Dangerous company you're keeping." "No more dangerous than yours, Monroe," Gabriel replied. What do you want?" Monroe smiled thinly. "You know what I want. the journal your brother stole, the Apache woman, and an end to this tiresome interference in my business affairs. Your business affairs? Gabriel's voice rose with genuine incredulity. Is that what you call massacre and grave robbery? I call it progress, Hayes. This territory is changing. Men like me are building its future. Monroe's expression hardened. The old ways and those who cling to them must make way. Even if that means murder? Even if it means betraying the very laws you claim to uphold? Monroe laughed, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. Laws are for the weak, Hayes. The strong make their own rules. Your brother learned that lesson too late. He gestured expansively. Look around you, these savages hiding in caves, praying to rocks and rivers. They're finished. History has no place for them. And who decides that? Gabriel demanded. Men like you who kill for gold and call it destiny? Enough philosophy, Monroe snapped, his patience visibly thinning. You have 1 minute to surrender the journal and the woman, or my men will storm these caves and kill everyone inside. Gabriel held his ground, silently willing the cavalry to hurry. The journal's gone, Monroe, on its way to people even you can't bribe or threaten. It's over. Monroe's face twisted with rage. Nothing's over until I say it is. He turned to his men. Prepare to... The distant thunder of hoofbeats cut him off mid-sentence. From the western entrance of the valley, a column of blue-uniformed cavalry appeared, riding hard toward Monroe's position. At their head rode a captain in full uniform, and beside him, her black hair streaming behind her like a banner, Naya. Monroe's men shifted nervously, several turning their horses as if preparing to flee. Monroe himself sat frozen, watching as the military force rapidly closed the distance. Ezra Monroe, Tate! The captain's voice rang out as they drew near. By order of the territorial governor, you are under arrest for murder, theft, and conspiracy against the United States government. For a moment, it seemed Monroe might surrender. Then with a savage cry, he wheeled his horse and spurred it toward the eastern exit of the valley. 2 of his men followed. The rest threw down their weapons and raised their hands in surrender. Gabriel leaped from his position, racing toward where Naya had dismounted from her horse. She turned at his approach, her face lighting with relief and joy. You live, she said simply. You succeeded, he replied, resisting the urge to embrace her in front of the soldiers and Apache alike. Judge Harmon read journal, she explained. Send telegram to governor. Governor order arrest. Her expression grew serious. But Monroe escapes. Gabriel leaped from his position, racing toward where Naya had dismounted from her horse. She turned at his approach, her face lighting with relief and joy. You live, she said simply. You succeeded, he replied, resisting the urge to embrace her in front of the soldiers and Apache alike. Journey hard, she said, exhaustion evident beneath her composure. Monroe men track me first day, almost catch at river crossing. Hide 2 nights in canyon, no fire, little water. How did you convince them? Gabriel asked, glancing at the uniformed soldiers. Naya's expression turned solemn. Reached Prescott at dawn yesterday. Judge Harmon not believe Apache woman at first. Tell me wait outside while he speak to real people. A hint of satisfaction crossed her face. But journal have Thomas's name. Judge remember Thomas Hayes from before. Respected scout with good reputation. So he listened, Gabriel said. She nodded. I show him markings in journal, maps of burial grounds, names of scouts killed, then show him sacred things from pouch. Her voice lowered. Judge grow very quiet when see medals from dead scouts. Medals government give them before killing them. Captain Forrester approached, nodding respectfully to Naya. Ms. Nahimana showed remarkable courage, he added. When Judge Harmon hesitated to act immediately, she refused to leave his office, stood there without food or rest until he read every page of that journal. The governor himself ordered this expedition when the evidence reached him, Forrester continued. Said it was a stain on territorial honor that demands immediate remedy. Naya looked past them toward the valley entrance. Judge Harmon read journal, send telegram to governor. Governor order arrest. Her expression grew serious. But Monroe escapes. The cavalry captain approached, touching his hat in salute. Captain James Forrester, Fort Whipple. You must be Gabriel Hayes. He glanced toward the caves. Is Thomas Hayes here? His testimony will be crucial. He's wounded but alive, Gabriel confirmed, thanks to these people. He gestured toward Running Fox and the other Apache who had emerged from hiding. Captain Forrester nodded respectfully to the elder. The governor sends his personal assurance that the sacred burial grounds will receive full protection under territorial law. The desecration ends today. As the captain organizes men to secure Monroe's surrendered followers, Gabriel turned back to Naya. Monroe won't get far. Not with every lawman in the territory looking for him. He desperate man now, she agreed. Most dangerous kind. They made their way to the cave where Thomas was now sitting up, supported by blankets, his face drawn with pain, but his eyes clear. When he saw Naya, a smile broke across his features. You did it, he said, reaching out to grasp her hand. I knew you would. Naya squeezed his hand gently. We all did it. Together. As night fell, the valley took on an air of cautious celebration. The Apache shared food with the cavalry soldiers, a rare moment of peace between worlds so often in conflict. Captain Forrester confirmed that Judge Harmon had issued warrants not only for Monroe, but for several officials complicit in covering up the massacre of the Apache scouts and the subsequent theft from sacred burial grounds. It won't bring back those who died, the captain told Thomas as they sat around the fire. But it's justice of a sort. Thomas nodded, his expression distant. Justice is rare enough that we should welcome it in any form it takes. Gabriel found Naya sitting alone outside the cave entrance, gazing up at the stars. He settled beside her, following her gaze to the brilliant sweep of the Milky Way. Your ancestors? He asked quietly. She smiled. And yours. All people share same squinting. They sat in companionable silence for a time, the events of the past days settling around them like silt after a flood. What will you do now? Gabriel finally asked. Return to your people? Naya considered the question, her face thoughtful in the starlight. My people scattered, some here, some there. Home not place anymore. She glanced at him. What about you? Return to cabin by river? Gabriel thought of his solitary existence by the river, the silence that had once seemed like peace but now felt empty. I'm not sure there's anything to go back to. Monroe's men probably burned it to the ground. Can build again, she suggested. Yes, he agreed. But should I? Before she could respond, a commotion erupted from the valley entrance. A sentry's warning shout was followed by the sharp crack of a rifle shot. Gabriel leaped to his feet, drawing his pistol as he pushed Naya behind him. Ezra Monroe stumbled into the firelight, wild-eyed and disheveled, clutched in his trembling hands. Blood stained his shirt. He'd been wounded in his escape, perhaps by one of his own men. Hayes, he snarled, swinging the rifle toward Gabriel. This is your doing, all of it. Time seemed to slow as the rifle barrel aligned with Gabriel's chest. He raised his pistol, knowing he was too late. A flash, a deafening report, and Monroe staggered, a look of surprise crossing his face as his rifle discharged harmlessly into the ground. Behind him stood Thomas, swaying on his feet, smoke curling from the revolver in his hand. Monroe fell to his knees, then toppled forward onto his face. Captain Forrester and his men rushed forward, but it was immediately clear that Ezra Monroe would face no earthly justice. The bullet had found his heart. Thomas sank back against the cave wall, his strength spent by the final act of protection. Couldn't let him take another brother from me, he murmured as Gabriel reached his side. In the chaos that followed as the cavalry secured the scene and the Apache melted back into their caves, Gabriel found himself sitting once more beside Naya, both of them processing the abrupt end to Monroe's reign of terror. It's over now, she said quietly. Truth wins. At what cost? Gabriel wondered aloud. Truth always costs, Naya replied, but secrets cost more. Dawn broke over the valley, painting the cliffs in shades of gold and rose. Captain Forrester prepared to depart with his men and prisoners, while arrangements were made to transport Thomas to the fort hospital once he was strong enough to travel. Gabriel stood at the valley entrance, watching as the world awakened to a new day. The river of events that had brought him here, from the flood that delivered Naya to his door, to the revelation of Thomas's survival, to the final confrontation with Monroe, seemed both random and purposeful, as though guided by some unseen current toward this moment. A soft footfall announced Naya's presence beside him. "What you thinking?" she asked. "About rivers," he answered honestly. "How they carry us places we never expected to go." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "My people say water not just hold memory, it change shape but never truly disappear, like truth." "And you," Gabriel added, turning to face her fully. "It gave me you." Something shifted in her expression. Vulnerability beneath the strength that had carried her through so much. "What happens now?" she asked. "When all this over?" Gabriel thought of the cabin by the river, of the solitary life he'd built there. It had been a refuge once, a place to nurse wounds that seemed beyond healing. But now, we could rebuild, he suggested. Not just the cabin, a life. He hesitated, then added, "Together, if you wanted." Naya studied his face, searching for something in his eyes. Her eyes met his, vulnerability showing beneath her strength. "If all sacred things gone," she whispered, "if only me remain, would that be enough?" Gabriel reached out, his weathered hand enveloping hers. "It's not what you carry that matters," he said, voice rough with emotion. "It's what you are, the part that can't be stolen or burned or washed away. That's what I'd stay for." Tears shimmered in her eyes, catching the first light of morning. "In my language," she said, "Nahimana means mystic, but also means spirit of the river." She smiled through her tears. "Like I born to find you through water." Gabriel brushed a tear from her cheek, marveling at the strange paths that had brought them together. "Then maybe the river remembers us kindly after all." As the sun climbed higher, painting the desert in brilliant light, they stood together at the threshold of something new. Behind them lay pain and loss, betrayal and violence, the dark currents that had shaped their lives. Before them stretched an uncertain future, but one they would navigate together. The river had taken much from both of them, but in its relentless flow it had also returned what mattered most: truth, family, purpose, and the courage to begin again. Like the water that carves canyons through solid stone, they had been shaped by forces beyond their control, transformed by time and trauma into something stronger, deeper, more resilient. And as they turned back toward the caves, toward Thomas and whatever lay beyond this valley, Gabriel understood at last what Naya had tried to tell him from the beginning. The river remembers everything, every word, every sin, every moment of grace. When it floods, it brings the past back to your door. Sometimes, if you're fortunate, it brings exactly what you need to heal. Sometimes, it brings you home. 3 months later, a small cabin stood where Gabriel's old one had been. It was different, larger, with windows that faced east to catch the sunrise, and a covered porch that overlooked the river. Thomas sat there now, a cane resting against his chair, watching as Gabriel and Running Fox worked on a small garden plot. "Captain Forrester sent word from Fort Whipple," Thomas said as Gabriel approached. "Judge Harmon's commission has secured 5 more burial grounds. No more looting permitted." Gabriel nodded, satisfaction warming his chest. The territorial governor's investigation into Monroe's crimes had revealed corruption reaching all the way to Washington. More importantly, it had established new protections for Apache's sacred sites, small justice for generations of wrongs, but a beginning nonetheless. "And the scouts?" Gabriel asked, thinking of the men who had died alongside Thomas's Apache comrades. "Officially recognized as having died in service to their country," Thomas replied. "Their families will receive compensation." He looked toward the hills where some of Naya's people had established a seasonal camp. Not enough, but something. From inside the cabin came the sound of Naya's voice, singing softly in Apache as she prepared medicines. She had become known in the region for her healing skills, treating both settlers and native people who sought her out. Some whispered she had special sight, a gift for seeing what others missed. Gabriel knew only that her wisdom had brought light where darkness had reigned. That evening, they gathered by the river as the sun set. Gabriel had built a small shrine there, not in any particular tradition, but a place to honor those lost and those found again. As twilight deepened around them, he took out his harmonica and played the melody that had once reminded Naya of home. "The river has changed its course," Thomas observed, watching the water that now flowed gentler around a new bend. "River's always changing," Naya said, her English still accented but more confident now. but memory remains. She reached for Gabriel's hand, her fingers warm against his. On her wrist, she wore a bracelet he had made from silver and turquoise, a wedding band in her people's tradition. They had spoken their promises 2 weeks earlier, with Thomas and Running Fox as witnesses, blending Apache ceremonies with the simple vows Gabriel remembered from his mother's Bible. "What you thinking?" she asked, noticing his contemplative expression. "About endings and beginnings," he answered. "How they're not always easy to tell apart." She smiled, understanding in her eyes. "In my people's stories, circle has no end, only turns." As darkness settled completely, stars emerged above them, brilliant points of light reflecting in the river below. To the east, where the mountains met the sky, the first sliver of moon appeared. "You know," Thomas said softly, "I think Father would hardly recognize his sons now." He glanced at Gabriel. Two Hayes brothers, one married to an Apache medicine woman, one learning tribal ways. He wouldn't, Gabriel agreed, but Mother would understand. They sat in companionable silence, three people bound by choice rather than blood or circumstance. The past could not be undone. Not the war that had scarred Gabriel, nor the massacre Thomas had survived, nor the persecution Naya's people had endured. But here, beside a river that remembered everything, they had found a way to build something new from what remained. Later, as Gabriel and Naya walked back to the cabin hand in hand, she paused to look back at the water gleaming silver in the moonlight. "You ever regret," she asked, "pulling stranger from river that day?" Gabriel shook his head, drawing her close. "That wasn't the day the river changed my life," he said. "It was the day I finally listened to what it had been telling me all along." "And what was that?" she asked, her face tilted up to his. "That some things lost can be found again," he answered. "And that sometimes what the river remembers," he smiled, touching her cheek gently, "is exactly what the heart needs to heal." As they turned toward home, toward the lights spilling golden from the cabin windows, toward Thomas waiting on the porch, toward the future they were building together, Gabriel knew with certainty that whatever waters might rise, whatever storms might come, they would face them as they had faced everything else, together remembering not just what the river had taken, but what it had returned.